This is going to be another book review, and this book review is Taiwan Travelogues. They just won the Booker Prize last month, and I that was the book for this month's book club. So I actually have the book in English and in Mandarin, and I decided to read the Mandarin one. But the Booker Club Prize is written by the English. It's a translation, the English translation. So the Mandarin one is 台湾漫游绿绿 Taiwan 漫游旅 which means Taiwan Travelogue. I would say so very quick understanding, because this time I approached this book a bit differently. So instead of spending a lot of time reading, I also spend time just listening to interviews, getting people's opinion on the book. Also, because I'm reading in Mandarin, it's also traditional Mandarin, it's a bit different. How is it different? So I want to talk about how is it different reading in Mandarin and the book style. I want to talk about the interviews that I've read and just general opinions about the book, and then the book itself. So for the book, I will give it, maybe it depends on who you are, your background, where you come from. I think if you're new to Taiwan, I think this book is very interesting and I would highly recommend. I think it interests someone to go to Taiwan. So that would be a 5 out of 5. For me, I've been to Taiwan multiple times. I know the Taiwan culture pretty well, and I would say it's maybe a 3.5 out of 5. So good to read, enjoy reading it. I don't think I want to read it again. So the book itself is written by a Taiwanese author, and it's a very interesting take of the structure of the book. So it comes from the perspective where this book is written by the fictional story behind it is that this Japanese lady, she's a novelist. She went to Taiwan and did a whole train travel going from the north to the south. Oh wait, or is it from the south to the north? Anyway, just going vertically. And um the main thing that she also wants to experience is the food culture. So they talk a lot about food. And that's why I think it's very interesting. If you're new to Taiwan, that's a very interesting angle to enter and appreciate Taiwan with the food, the culture, the heritage. A lot of the food is not just Chinese, like coming from mainland China's food influence, but there's also, of course, a lot of local Taiwan food influence, but also Japanese food influence. And we'll talk about that in the second section of the connection between the context, the setting of the book. So the first part is, I think the book is very, just reading from a Mandarin perspective, right? Reading the Mandarin version, it is very Taiwanese. And I know that, it's okay. So wait, one step back. So the book is written by this. The idea is that it's written by this Japanese woman, a novelist. She wrote it in Japan, like a true account story. She wrote it in Japanese and then got translated to the Mandarin version, and that is the thing that I'm reading. In reality, it's just a book written from a first person's perspective of the novelist, and then writing with some like translation. And so there are a lot of footnotes in there, and then at the end, after 12 chapters, there are like 5 different afterwards to like written by different people. So you have that, and then the third one, which is the English version, the translated version, it also has the afternotes of that author. So it's very interesting because it seems like the book is Japanese translated to Mandarin, translated to English. In reality, it's just a book written in Mandarin, got translated to English. So this book is very interesting because it's like an onion with a lot of different layers as you peel apart. So the book itself is, it talks about this woman going on a journey in Taiwan, and she's Japanese. So she can't really communicate with people, especially from the small villages, if she want to try the food. So she has a translator with her, and she's Taiwanese. And so they go on a journey together. Now, so that's the general gist. Now we'll go into details later, but moving on to the second part, the context of this story is very important because it is not just about the context of someone exploring, someone with a YouTube vlogging about their journey through Taiwan. But a very important understanding is that Japan colonized Taiwan for a good period of time. And, there between colonizers and the colonized, the relationship is always there is always a divide in that relationship. And you can see it very clearly in the book because it all came from the first person's perspective of the Japanese woman. Her interpreter is a Taiwanese woman, and you could see that hierarchy in place. Not only that, the Japanese woman has her she's the colonizer at the end of the day, right? So she simply just has more power on a social standing perspective. And yeah, I remember there's one time. I mean, then they also talk some stuff about like feminism. I remember that there was um the Japanese lady was angry on behalf of the Taiwanese lady because she was not respected because she's a woman and things like that. So it's a very simple, easy to read book, but there are a lot of different layers in place. Now, a lot of the interesting thing is reading the footnotes. I didn't read so much of it. I would say a lot of footnotes, at least in the early chapters, it was all about these Japanese culture things in the footnotes, and I don't really understand that. So, for example, there's some circus or plays in Japanese, like famous in Japan, but I don't know that. So having those footnotes help. Um, but okay, going back to the writing. So okay, so the context, the setting is a colonizer going to the country they colonize, so Japanese going to Japan, going to Taiwan, and then the entire interaction relationship. In Taiwan, there are three, no, maybe four types of people. Or maybe, okay, let's put it three types of people that involve the Japanese and Taiwanese culture. So ignore the mainland Chinese people. So you have Japanese who are born in Japan and then colonize Taiwan. So colonizers. There are Japanese who are born in Taiwan and grew up in Taiwan. And then the third one, they are Taiwanese islanders born on the island. And so these three categories of people play different roles in the country throughout the history. And the history of colonizers is never a very rosy picture. But I've been to Taiwan many times. I've got Taiwanese friends, and we talk a lot about the history and because in Southeast Asia, right? So not Taiwan, not East Asia, but Southeast Asia and China, the Japanese occupation during World War II was absolutely horrible and horrendous. Everything we learn about the Japanese growing up, learning about history, is the cruel things the Japanese have done in the countries. The Nanjing, the rape of Nanjing, for example, it's absolutely horrible, and don't read it if you want to have a good day. The Wikipedia is absolutely scary and horrendous. Okay, so my understanding of Japanese being colonizers is not a very pretty picture. But when I go to Taiwan and I speak to my Taiwanese friends, they have a very fond appreciation of the Japanese culture or the Japanese occupation because it was a bit more of a peaceful thing, and there were a lot of education and uplifting of the society. At least for my friends in Taiwan. I know that's a small sample size, but it just seems that overall there is no resentment to the Japanese. Take, for example, my grandmother, when she was alive, she still hated Japanese. She still hated Japan. She still hated Japanese because of what happened during the war. So it is a very different perspective of Japanese being colonizers in the history of China and Southeast Asia versus Taiwan. But there seems to be a bit more appreciation over there. It's not so much of a we will exploit you, but there's a bit more of a we'll come and uplift your economy. So there's a bit of respect over there, and we can see that being translated also into the food, the Taiwanese food, or the food that's available in Taiwan. Maybe there's a bias because the author is Japanese, so there is Japanese influence. But I know that when I'm in Taiwan, there are a lot of food that has a lot of Japanese influence in the food. So that's the context of the colonizer setting in the story. The third section is the story itself. So the story itself it's okay. I mean, of course, it's a lot of food, a lot of food. As I'm reading it, I have YouTube open on the side and just going through all the recipes. Like, okay, show me how to make this, how to make that, and I'm salivating, just wanting to eat all of these things while reading the book. So I highly recommend this book for someone who wants to go on a trip to Taiwan and do a food tour out of it. I think that'd be really, really fun. So that is one side of thing. The book storyline itself is, I want to talk about the Taiwanese versus Chinese writing. So mainland Chinese stories are, I mean, this is a big generalization, but it's a bit more, loyalty to your nation, a bit more loyalty to family, a lot of filial piety, 孝顺 in there. Taiwanese stories or just Taiwanese media, Taiwanese entertainment there is a lot of loyalty to Taiwan, as in Taiwan is not China, that whole thing. But it's a lot more open, it's a lot more colorful. Yes, Taiwanese writing is a lot more colorful, it's a lot more flowing. I think I almost want to describe it as Portuguese in Portugal and Portuguese in Brazil. The Portuguese in Brazil is a lot more flowy. It's very dancey. It's very playful. And I think the Chinese writing in Taiwan is a little bit like that. You can hear the intonation of people even just by reading the book. You can hear the intonation of people, the emotions. It's wonderful. Whereas the mainland Chinese writing, it's different. Even if it's poetic, it's beautiful. The literature style is quite different. So I don't think that has anything to add to the book review of the book itself, but I think it's quite beautiful to see that difference and contrast, right, in the cultures. And I grew up watching a lot of Taiwanese media, like entertainment, and so there is a lot of the influence in the writing style of the book, as opposed to Chinese entertainment and Chinese media. It's completely different. I think if you're not Chinese and you don't watch these you don't understand much about the culture, you can't tell the difference, but it is quite different. Okay, now going on to the book, finally, part 3, going to the book. I would say, okay, so there's a lot of food, very interesting, lots of little interactions, very, very cute, very easy to read, very, very comforting kind of the first few chapters, the first 12 chapters, very cute, very interesting. And I guess the twist comes in towards the end. Of course, spoilers. Turns out the Japanese woman's gay. She's interested in the interpreter, but the interpreter has a arranged marriage that she has to go marry another man, and it's that kind of society. And so, it's like a plot twist at the end. And in the book, you can see that the interpreter is very like a subordinate listening to a boss. Yes, I'll just be smiling, very meek, behind the scenes kind of thing. Now, after the book, there is like 5 afterwards, like small little things written. One is by the novelist's daughter. One is by the interpreter's daughter, I think, and then one is by like the original author, which is the original author of the book. But in this fake storyline, she's the one that translated the Japanese book to the Mandarin version. And then the 2 more. Anyway, it's very interesting because, as I said, the book has a lot of Taiwan flavors in the conversation, but it's supposed to be a translation from a Japanese novelist. So there is also the Japanese kind of writing in place. I don't read Japanese books in Japanese because I don't speak Japanese, so I don't know that. But I can imagine there's a lot of Japanese influence in the writing style of the book as well. It's not just pure Taiwanese culture. And in the book, it talks a lot about it, explores a lot more about colonizers' view of or like a colon, the main authors, the main novelist, right? She's Japanese. She's the colonizer in this situation, and she expresses her love for this interpreter and expects that back in return, almost like a colonizer's expectation of what yeah of the expectation when they colonize land and the people there, right? So there's a lot more cultural nuance in there, and towards the end, with all these writings in place, it opens up a lot more discussion, which I think is very interesting. And this kind of one-sided book review is not very it doesn't add enough color. I think this needs to be an open conversation, especially people living in different places. Thus, that is why I started just watching more interviews and comments online. I've read reviews from book reviews by the West, so a British lady and a couple of American men, and then also the Chinese ones. One lady, she's from the mainland China. She lives in Canada, and I think she's quite pro Taiwan independence. One guy, he's from Taiwan, lives in Taiwan, and so and then he also interviewed the original author. And yes, so and then I also listened to the speech by the interpreter when they won the Booker Prize. So there's a lot more context coming into the conversation. Okay, um, how should we split this? Maybe we split this to the East versus West conversation first, and then I want to focus more about the East perspective and also the author's interview. So East versus West, the West is a bit more I think great reviews. I've love the book, love talking about the food, understand the different layers into the book. So that is great. The East, on the other hand, the East, not on the other hand, but the East adding to that perspective, I think they add a lot more color into the conversation. So, for example, when the person who won the Booker Prize is the English version of the book. So the interpreter won it, and also the author won it. The interpreter, she she does a lot of translation from Mandarin to English, just to increase the reach of these books. At the same time, she also understands the impact of the importance of these books to be read by the general population. And she's from Taiwan, and she's made it her life mission and purpose to only translate Taiwanese authors to English to increase the reach of international readers, which I think is a very noble mission. Again, because I said mainland Chinese books versus Taiwanese books, although they are all Mandarin, it's a very different style and culture. And it's not that one is better than the other. I think it's important to keep the heritage and keep the style of writing, the way of expression. It's just keeping the culture. So I think that is very lovely for, and of course there are a lot of political movements there as well. And I can also understand the book winning the prize, because it's not just the book being, great book, lots of layers to that, but also I think it helps. This goes to a lot of politics, but it also helps Taiwan to be seen as a literary place, and have more conversations about Taiwan as a, I want to say, country, but I don't know if that's the right term. Anyway, it's Taiwan as a place. Also, again, the Chinese literature is just quite different. So growing up, we had to learn a lot of these Chinese poems. In fact, one of the poems was in the book, which I was very happy about because it jotted a memory when I was very, very small. Uh, Chinese poetry is more loyalty to the country, loyalty to the family, as opposed to Taiwan, less about poetry, more about culture and a way to express culture. And I think it's very beautiful. I like it. Then we go into the Taiwanese version. So the Taiwanese one of the reviewers, he said this is very good because it puts Taiwan back on the map again. People are talking about it. It's very, very interesting. It's also a really great introduction to for people to go to Taiwan, which I think is fantastic. He also interviewed the author, and the author said initially she wanted to write this in a third person's perspective. She has written like 500 or 5,000 words, and then she had to delete everything and restart writing from a first person's perspective because the book is better communicated from a first person's perspective. Although we might lose some dimension of what the interpreter is saying or what other people are thinking, it's better to communicate it from a first person's perspective in this novel, the writing of this novel. And there are a lot of different aspects that is weaved into it. Writing a book, especially a fiction book, it's not as easy as just, oh, I just put the idea into ChatGPT and then like spit it out, right? I think good books have gone through a lot of thoughts of processing. One thing I think is very important, which we see time and time again in the book, is that history is written by the victors at the end of the day, right? And this book is written by the Japanese colonizer novelist. And so in this situation, some of the things could be exaggerated, some of the things could be probably would have been more prominent, but less seen in the as prominent in the book. Some facts could potentially be altered a little. And where do we see this? We see this in the Greek tragedies, right? We have Odyssey, we have the poems written by Homer. What do we have? We have Odyssey and something. I forgot. Oh my goodness, my brain's not working right now. But anyway, these are history in the past, right? History is written through history is shared through orative, speaking, passing from generations to generations. You ask what your grandfather did, what his life was, and then you share it with your kids, with your grandkids, and then the story passes down. Along the way, have you played the telephone game? Along the way, by three passes, the whole thing changes. And that, sometimes in history, there is the absolute fact and truth, and there is the perspective interpretation of truth. I guess that's the way to put it. And so this, and I think the author did come from this perspective of, okay, when we talk about history, what is the truth? What needs to be shared? Do we share the beautiful flowery words like the Odyssey and talk about all these adventures, or do we want a history like encyclopedia, just writing the facts down? Because that changes how people perceive a certain historical fact. And I know this is not a real book, it's not a life story, this is a fiction, historical fiction kind of, but this can really be translated in the history of Taiwan, right? As there's more um friction between Taiwan and China, the victor gets to write the history. And how do we determine what's real? Because what is real also depends from different people's perspective. There are a lot of these illusion things where someone sees the letter E and someone sees the letter S, but it's the same picture. You're just standing from a different perspective. The same thing, the truth, right? When we talk about history, we want to talk about the truth, we want to be factual, but could we ever do that? Because the same thing happened in history, but the colonizer versus the colonized, they're very different perspective of what actually happened. So I think this book is very interesting and it's a perfect book for book club because it opens up a lot more conversation. It opens up a lot more issues to ponder upon. It's not as easy as, oh, let's go to Taiwan and eat all these nice food and travel. But the history that got Taiwan to where they are today, or anywhere you travel. So that's a very long review. Oh my goodness. That's my review of Taiwan Travelogue. Bye.